Hello. Welcome to Security, Cryptography, whatever. I'm Deirdre.
I'm David.
I'm Thomas.
Yay, welcome back, Thomas. We haven't talked to you in a while.
I'm here.
Today we're talking about a new quantum attack on RSA. Is RSA 2048-bit broken? Question mark. Spoilers, it's not broken. Sorry, it's not broken. But we wanted to talk about it because lots of people have asked us about what the fuck is this? Is this real? People have written blog posts about it. People have tried to make takes, I guess, on it. And so we crammed, and now we're making our take on it. Thomas.
My first response to this is stop asking us for this stuff.
So what happened this week?
I think it was...
So what was released this week or last week? Or
It wasn't released this week. I think it was released just before Christmas.
Okay, so that's still within the realm of this past week.
Sure,
in my worldview, that counts as this week.
In the smudging of time that is the New Year and the holidays. The paper is called Factoring Integers with Sublinear Resources on a Superconducting Quantum Processor. And it alleges that you can use a quantum circuit with 372 physical qubits, which is like pretty much kind of what we have currently for normal like IBM, Google quantum computers, and numbers of qubits, which is what a lot of people think is all you need, would break, has an algorithm using that, would break, aka factor the modulus of RSA 2048.
Right. So for like a moment here, I'm going to pretend like I know what I'm talking about, but I have to give my disclaimer that to an extent, surpassing even previous podcasts of ours, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about here. But all right. So like there's like the well understood notion that like one of like the big thing that quantum computing theoretically breaks is RSA, right? And the reason for
discrete log.
Yeah. Basically all conventional previous I always have the wrong terms for like FFDH and things like that, right? But elliptic curve, RSA, all that stuff, like they break it because of an algorithm called Shor's, confusingly, Shor's algorithm, right?
Correct, yes.
All right. So like we all know quantum computers break RSA if you can get a quantum computer of, that size, which I don't believe they exist, but whatever,
right.
With Shor's algorithm, right? So the problem with that is that the computers that you need, the quantum computers that you need to use Shor's algorithm are huge. They're much, much bigger than anything that we've got even on the horizon, right? So the confusing thing here with this paper, the news in this paper, is that rather than using Shor's algorithm at all, they're using Schnorr's algorithm.
With an
which
N.
Is, yes, Schnorr with an N. The Schnorr of Schnorr signatures, right?
Yes.
Like the famous Klaus Schnorr.
Yes.
The S in RSA.
No.
What?
No.
What?
RSA is, altogether now, Revest, Shamir, and Edelman.
Oh, I can't keep track, man. I once got yelled at. So I once got yelled at by Shamir, and then I just kind of merged all older cryptographers. I got yelled at by Shamir for because I was doing internet measurement incorrectly, which I was not.
Oh.
Nothing about cryptography, and then accosted by one of his students at Black Hat. And so I've merged all of the older S cryptographers into one thing that
Shamir,
people now largely ignore.
Schnorr, they're all the same, and they're all mean to me.
More or less.
So so Schnorr's algorithm is not a quantum algorithm, right? Schnorr's algorithm is it's a conventional or classical algorithm for factoring that has a long history. It's a big part of the history of the factoring problem is Schnorr's algorithm. So we've known about Schnorr's algorithm for forever, right?
And it's gone through iterations. It's gone through like 30 years almost of Schnorr trying to attack the factoring problem in several ways that we'll continue to go into.
Maybe, or we'll just bounce around it and like give you a sort of quantum understanding of this. But anyways, there's this conventional algorithm for factoring called Schnorr's algorithm, which is like ostensibly it's supposed to be competitive with the fastest, superior to the fastest, kind of conventional factoring, the numeric field sieve and all that stuff, right? It's not, but that's the idea, right? Is that if you can get it working, Schnorr would say that if you could just get it working with the right parameters, that it's going to be much, much faster. And we'll get into that in a second, right? But anyways, the nut of this paper is forget building, quantum computers of unusual size, and instead take the simple quantum computers that we have right now and use them with an algorithm. I think it's QAOA or QOA.
Yeah.
Right.
Quantum algorithm quantum approximate optimization algorithm, which is like a thing that people keep trying to throw at problems in a similar way to this.
Right. It's quantum fairy dust, right? So take this conventional algorithm plus some quantum fairy dust, and you can make Schnorr's algorithm super fast.
In theory.
Right? And the big news there would be that would be a way of attacking RSA without building a serious quantum computer. You could use just a dumb quantum computer. I got to say before we go further, right? So the idea here is that this is an attack that you could carry out with a quantum computer kind of quote unquote of the size that we have right now with IBM Osprey or whatever, right? But and again, remember, I don't know what I'm talking about, right? but you can't take the qubit numbers that we have on those computers at face value, right? There's the nominal.
There's a lot of asterisks.
Yeah, there's the nominal number, and then there's the amount of extra qubits you would need for error correction to do different kinds of problems with different tolerances, right?
The computers that we have now, the quantum computers we have now, are called NISQ quantum computers, noisy intermediate scale quantum computers. They are noisy because they are not fault tolerant. You need to use quantum error correction to get any kind of guarantee that you need 3 physical qubits to get 1 error corrected logical qubit. There's issues about fault tolerance. There's issues about coherence. There's issues about circuit depth, which this paper only hand waved at and got addressed at the very end of their appendices, which is my kind of bugbear. There's a lot of asterisks behind those 300 something, 400 something physical qubits for computers nowadays. And I would say that this technique of combining a quantum part of your algorithm and your classical part of an algorithm is not novel. There's a lot of more venerable papers that are considered true threats to, say, isogeny-based systems. These are called hybrid attacks, where they take some of your attack is using some sort of quantum part, and you do the rest of it with a well-trod classical part, and then you use the best of both worlds to get the best attack that you can. But this one is sort of taking a not well-established classical attack and trying to speed up the part that it would want to be sped up with some quantum fairy dust. And we don't think it gets there. A lot of people don't think it gets there.
Yeah, what's the part that you want to go at here, right? Or which part do you want to go at first, right? Do we want to talk about the Schnorr approach, this tangent kind of conventional approach to factoring, or do you want to talk more about quantum computers and circuit depths, which is you could keep talking because I won't be able to say anything.
I will say that one part of this paper that people keep pointing to is these authors go out of their way to avoid talking about the runtime of this attack when you actually run it with classical computers and, existing quantum computers, because the running time is not polynomial in the size of the thing you're attacking, which is 2048 bits in the case of RSA or some other security factor. It's actually either sub-exponential or possibly exponential, which means it's not a very good attack, and it's actually not, it doesn't beat the state of the art that we actually have for attacking RSA and doing factoring classically.
This is in the supposed quantum incarnation of the attack.
Yeah. So it both is based on flimsy assumptions about our current quantum computers, flimsy Schnorr factoring attack, and also even if all these things actually worked, it would not actually be very fast at all. So it just kind of does not destroy RSA.
There's also possibly a securities fraud connection.
What?
Well, in terms of what quantum computers do. So there's a company called Rigetti, founded by someone named Rigetti. And I just realized apparently they went public via SPAC. And they claimed that at the time they had 8 and then maybe 80 bits of quantum computers. And then they said, we're going to get to 1,000 by 2024.
Yeah.
And they SPAC'd at $10 and their stock is currently at 75 cents.
Oh, boy.
So I'm getting the feeling we're not going to get a 1,000-bit quantum computer from them in the next year or two.
Wait, hold on. What's the connection between Rigetti and...
Rigetti.
With big red and not big head. Okay.
Yeah.
What's what's the connection between that company and this attack?
Oh, just that, like, if we're talking about, oh, you could do it with a 300 whatever bit computer, like, those don't actually exist, and the company that was claiming to have 1,000 is not going to get 1,000 anytime soon, and presumably, I don't know, maybe didn't even have 80.
I'm very sad. I was hoping you were to say that, like, put out a press release saying by the end of the year we'll have computers that can break RSA, which would have been awesome.
I mean, if they put out a 1024 qubit, like physical qubit or logical qubit computer, and you were able to run Shor's algorithm and factor like RSA 1024, that would be pretty huge. I think the current record is like RSA like 520, but they're not.
So I'm gonna take us on a short voyage of adventure here, right? Because this ties in like really neatly to the last big RSA like kerfuffle. So I'd forgotten this and put it completely out of my memory, and only like in the middle of preparing for this realized this is like this connects. But there was that thing like last year or the year before last where Klaus Schnorr submitted a new iteration of his paper on his lattice approach to factoring, where like it had a note saying this destroys the RSA crypto system.
It had a typo, and we were all like, what?
Yeah, and that's like, that was headlines everywhere. Like, this destroys RSA, signed
coming
Klaus
from
Schnorr.
Klaus Schnorr. Yeah.
There's this long history to this kind of approach, right? Where like, I think you can find papers going back to, I think I've got one from 91 on my screen right now, right? Where just the idea that you can reduce the factoring problem, you can find a bunch of like almost intuitive explanations for how this works. Just like, you know, kind of congruence relationship factoring, you know, like just as the factoring identity, right? To the SVP problem. So
the SVP problem is the shortest vector problem.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, if you want to tell people what a lattice is and what the shortest vector problem is.
Okay, a lattice.
Or we could say, just go listen to our episode with
Pikert.
Chris Pikert from last year.
Yes.
See, I wasn't on that episode. So.
Yes. Please refer back to our lattice-based crypto episode with Chris Pikert. It also mentions Michigan beating Ohio or something like that. But shortest vector problem is you're in a lattice with a defined basis, and you're trying to find the shortest vector in that lattice approximately. This is supposed to be an NP-hard problem. So all of the crypto systems that reduce to shortest vector problem are actually reducing to an approximation of the shortest vector problem, which is pretty good enough. And things like learning with errors and other lattice-based crypto systems that we think are quantum resistant are based on this sort of fundamental assumption. And then if we mention the closest vector problem, it is related but not exactly the same, where you're trying to find a closest with some measure of close to another vector in a similar lattice.
So like kind of I gather that like the approach of reducing factorization to a lattice SVP problem is kind of super interesting and has been for like the last 20 years. And like the 1990s were spent with people trying to get this, like there was a theory paper posted in 91, 93, something like that, right? And then like by the end of the 90s, somebody had like a working implementation of it. But it turns out when you go to implement it, that it's not competitive with the numeric field sieve, right? It certainly doesn't destroy RSA, right? It's actually less good than the conventional techniques that we have right now. It's interesting though, when people have done other research that was kind of based off of that idea. It's like it seems like it was a super valuable contribution to the science, if not to anything in practice. But it's like, you know, one of the backstories here is that Klaus Schnorr has been like a mad scientist tinkering in his laboratory for the past 15 years, like trying to find the one set of parameters where, you know, the Schnorr lattice-based factorization thing outcompetes the numeric field sieve or whatever,
and,
right?
Like, trying to find the right heuristics that will make it work. And it hasn't panned out.
And the last iteration of this was like a year and a half ago with the Destroys RSA paper, which is kind of sad, right? Like a bunch of people went at that paper because, I mean, it said it destroyed RSA. Like a bunch of cryptographers went at it. Like there were like basic errors that were kind of found in it. And it's like, you know, people had to say like Klaus Schnorr he's in his late 70s now. And so everyone doing this has to say like, I'm not like, you know, I have no problem with people that are old doing. I'm old. I get to say this, right? Not as old as Klaus Schnorr apparently, but Yeah, so like there was this whole sad thing about like, there's typos in this paper and basic errors and nobody understands why this paper was actually submitted, but like he's standing by it. He revoked the paper, he retracted the paper, but then he put it back up. And this is this whole weird paper thing, right? So like this is one of like the big stories in our RSA and conventional cryptography for the past, it's holy shit, it's like 2023 right now. For like 20 years, right? Like it's been this story. Like, does this approach work, right?
Yeah.
And the answer is no, right? Like that the conventional algorithm here doesn't work at all, right? And then like the quantum the quantum fairy dust that we're talking about sprinkling on this system, the QAOA or thing or whatever, right? Again, I have no idea what the fuck I'm talking about, but the reputation there is worse than that of Schnorr's algorithm, right? Like doesn't do anything at all, right? Am I off on that?
No, you're correct. Apparently, this is a thing where people keep trying to sprinkle QAOA onto problems like this. That's like, this will just, help with convergence or whatever when trying to do factoring or whatever. And we'll just throw some quantum at it and it'll speed up that part. And then like, that's actually not really panned out.
So the Schnorr's paper from a year and a half ago, Steve Weiss has a very nice breakdown as to why it doesn't destroy RSA. And then this paper from this past Christmas, more or less, is sprinkling quantum onto the Schnorr's paper to try and make it go even faster so that you can do it on tiny, tiny quantum computers. The issue with that to me is it's weird that a paper that uses the hard problem that we use for post-quantum cryptography would ever have a speed up on a quantum computer, right? Because SVP is the problem in Schnorr's factoring, and it's also the hard quantum cryptography problem. So why would a quantum computer make Schnorr's factoring algorithm go any faster, even if it did work better?
Yeah.
Right. It's like if you go back to the Chris Pikert episode that we had, which I will claim to have listened to, but I know some of the background here, right? Like all of post-quantum lattice cryptography reduces to the hardness of SVP or problems generalized from SVP, right? So it's super weird, right? Like it seems like you could like look at it just on its own terms and see like, okay, well, this involves you solving SVP, which is like a known quantum hard problem. So
I do know that using lattices to attack stuff and like solving lattice problems to attack other crypto systems is like a thing. But if you can reduce to the shortest vector problem and speed up that reduction and solving it, you're basically trying to use a quantum speed up to that algorithm to break the problem that underlies quantum resistant crypto systems. So it would be bad if that succeeded, but it doesn't look like it has succeeded. So we're happy-ish about that.
Yeah, it seems like the stretch claim I would make here, where somebody's going to tell me I'm just completely off, is that if that paper was true, it would also be saying something pretty important about post-quantum cryptography.
Yes. I don't understand this fully to pick out which part of Schnorr's solving factoring with this algorithm is being accelerated with the quantum circuit, but either way, yeah. So TLDR, no, this paper does not break 2048-bit RSA.
Yeah, I guess we could move on to the question of why are we talking about this?
Yeah, why did we just have a podcast about two papers that are wrongs? Let me tell you, as someone who did a PhD, many papers are wrong. So why are we talking about these two?
One, because people, we saw it come across radars and we're just like, ooh. And then people looked at it for a few minutes and we're just like, this seems sus. And then multiple people looked at it for more than 5 minutes and said, this seems sus. But not everyone has, enough cryptography background, attack background, knowledge of the state of quantum computing, knowledge of Schnorr's attempts to solve factoring via lattices to know that. And people have been asking us, and also people have been asking other people for their comments on, I saw a paper that claims it breaks RSA, like what? And people have been writing things.
Yeah, I'm gonna read the start of an article right now.
Okay.
The headline of the article is "Breaking RSA with a Quantum Computer," and the lead is, a group of Chinese researchers have just published a paper claiming that they can, although they have not yet done so, break 2048-bit RSA. This is something to take seriously. This is me, not the thing. This is something to take seriously. It might not be correct, but it is not, wait for it, obviously wrong. Would anyone like to guess the source?
Well, I already know.
Roger Grimes.
No?
No. I have barely any idea who Roger Grimes is. But that's a quote from the reason everyone's talking about this, right? Which is Schneier's blog.
Bruce Schneier.
Yes, not Klaus Schneier.
Different.
Bruce Schneier, the cryptographer from the deep.
Who is Bruce Schneier?
Bruce Schneier is somebody who has forgotten more about block cipher cryptography than I will ever bother to learn.
Okay.
So he's, a famous cryptography, I'm looking for the right term, famous cryptography person is the term I'm going to choose there, right? But he has probably the world's most read cryptography blog. The ostensible authoritative source for news about, in the sense of hard sci-fi, like hard cryptography, like not crypto as in cryptocurrency. I'm not saying it's the best source. I'm saying it's the source everyone goes to.
It's interesting because when I've started getting into cryptography, which was post-Snowden, I never found his blog to be that, but I'm coming to cryptography much later. So
Well, you were like 10 or 15 or 20 years late to when Schneier's blog was,
okay.
I think, big.
I've heard of several of his books, including a book called Applied Cryptography, and I almost bought that book until people told me that book is no longer useful to you and is perhaps actively harmful in today's day and age.
Yeah, I mean, I have been throwing shade. I try to not be snotty about throwing shade, but I've been throwing shade at Bruce Schneier for probably a decade now, maybe a little bit more. Not because I have any real problem with Bruce Schneier, who, there's a lot of things that Bruce Schneier is that I respect, right?
Yeah.
But Bruce Schneier's influence on kind of the engineering profession's understanding of cryptography is, what's the word I'm looking for? Right? So, I think he's pretty upfront about that too, right? So Bruce Schneier is most notable for writing Applied Cryptography, which is probably without a doubt the most famous book in cryptography. Not among cryptographers, right?
It's the big red one.
Right.
But not cryptographers outnumber cryptographers by 5,000 to 1, right?
Yeah.
So just on the numbers.
It was also the first book, I think, on cryptography, basically.
Okay.
There was the Koblitz book that came out, or Menezes that came out right before his. And it had a similar name, like Handbook of Applied Cryptography.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, there was drama back when Applied Cryptography came out because it had a similar name to the Menezes Handbook of Applied. Nobody cares about this. I don't know why I'm bringing this up. And
this is cool. This is back in the day when things were more hardcore, as it were.
Oh, that's a cute story, Thomas.
Yeah.
Okay. Now go sit down, Grandpa.
You guys are the worst.
Nah.
So I guess I have a couple of different ways to come at this, right? One of them is just frustrating is not the word, but let's just say it's frustrating to kind of be kind of steeped in Mastodon, Twitter, Hacker News kind of engineering culture and see the kind of mental model that people have of who Schneier is, or actually not who Schneier is so much, just how cryptography works, who cryptographers are.
Okay.
Apropos this podcast, a starting point is your mental model of me in cryptography should be Thomas is not a cryptographer. I'm not, right? I'm not a cryptography engineer. I'm just a doofus who looks for bugs and knows a little bit of cryptography, right? So I'm not putting myself ahead of anybody here, right? But
we're all putting Deirdre as the podcast cryptographer.
Oh.
Fair enough. Yes. So I think there's a general kind of people have a bit set in their head, just one, the Boolean, Schneier knows cryptography, right? Ergo, if there's a subject involving cryptography, it's good to get Schneier's take on that cryptography, right? But that has kind of pretty much never been true. And the reason for that is not that Schneier is terrible at what he does. He's not, right?
There's just a lot of cryptography now.
Yeah. So cryptography is super specialized, right? So as just a starting point, if you're with a couple of exceptions, if you're a person who specializes in, like, if you're a person who does block cipher designs, where like one of your block ciphers is like super widely used, chances are you're not an asymmetric crypto person. Like, you don't do a lot of like number theory research, or you're not like doing like Diophantine equations and elliptic curves. It's a different set of things, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you read attack papers about block ciphers, and then you read attack papers about like elliptic curves, they're not the same things,
no,
right?
They're
Not at all. Right?
Yeah,
like,
and like when I started getting into cryptography, I definitely came through the asymmetric way. I came through algebraic geometry and elliptic curves and isogenies, and like that is what gets me excited, and I get very, very into the block cipher stuff, even hashes, like symmetric stuff. I'm just sort of like, I know enough about them to be like, that's a good one. I like that one. I'm more interested in like block cipher modes and things like that. And like, I just do not have the depth on that side as I do on the asymmetric side.
Yeah.
Just because.
I mean, this podcast is a great example of Thomas's point, because like everything Deirdre just said, Thomas is nominally like an attack person. And then I am more of like a networks and secure transports person, and all of us are effectively out of our depth on today's episode talking about factoring in quantum computers, right? And it's not like we're lacking, and we have a particularly high density of cryptography knowledge on this podcast.
Right. And like, I know enough about quantum computers just so that I can model the attack, the adversary, for my favorite, squidgy, isogeny-based, theoretically quantum resistant crypto systems and the problems that they're underpin. I have to know enough about the adversary and their capabilities, aka they have, in theory, a large, error-corrected, very efficient quantum computer that's going to try to attack me. But like, kind of beyond that, I leave it to the like computer scientists who do quantum computing, because I don't have to know everything about those to understand enough to design a crypto system that should be resilient against a, strongly modeled adversary.
Yeah, I just ask Nadia.
Yeah,
whenever this stuff happens.
Well, let's put a pin in that. I want to come back to that in a second, right? But like, but Schneier's a block cipher guy, right? Schneier is like, he's really well known for, he's a couple of things, right? He's a block cipher guy, and I mean, he's a pundit, right? But he's also like, he's a practitioner in the sense that I am. I don't know actually what Schneier's background is. Like, I don't know if he's got like a graduate degree in any of this stuff, or like, the way he's published. And I'm not published at all here, right? But like, Schneier does like, or has, led companies that do like just IT security stuff, like stuff that has nothing to do with cryptography. He's just like a security guy.
Schneier has a master's degree in computer science, an honorary PhD from UW, presumably because he wrote that book with Yoshi. And then has a policy appointment in one of the Harvard associated think tank thingy dingies.
And he's responsible for Blowfish, which was a really popular block cipher. He was responsible for Twofish, and then like a hash based on Twofish, which I forget the name of. But like, so hashes and block ciphers, closely related disciplines. And like, if you look at like the absolute state of the art in hash breaking stuff right now, right? I'm saying it's just, right? But it's not just. But it's like, it's modernized, refined versions of the differential cryptanalysis attack, right? Like the same line of, there's nothing, I'm not talking down this line of research, right? It's incredible research, right? But it's like, it's a very specific set of research that applies in no sense whatsoever to RSA. There's just no application to it. They're not similar problems, right?
Pretty much.
Schneier is like written for a long time. Like he wrote Applied Cryptography, which has some stuff about RSA in it. And then he's a co-author of Practical Cryptography, which is a much better book, right? And Practical Cryptography has some pretty decent for the time advice about RSA. So certainly it seems clear that he knows his shit when it comes to the basics of RSA and kind of using RSA safely, right? But he's also kind of notorious. Maybe he's only notorious with me, but he's notorious for like, I don't trust the math on elliptic curve cryptography, which is like a statement that, first of all, it clearly didn't age well, right? But it's also like,
well, that was what everybody thought in like the late 90s, early 2000s, right?
That's what I was trying to ask, is like, was he the patient zero for that sentiment, or was that just sort of a common sentiment and he was also voicing it, but he had a popular blog?
I don't remember it being a common sentiment. Like, I'm the person on this recording that was there for that. And I don't remember that being a common sentiment so much as the pervasive miasma of ignorance about cryptography at the time. Like, nobody having these conversations, at least the ones that I saw at the time, would have had any business having an opinion about elliptic curve cryptography, with very few exceptions. The people talking about this stuff, like, I don't understand at the time in those conversations, I don't trust the math is equivalent to, I don't know what the fuck this math is, right? And the math isn't that complicated, right? The math, it's not like I don't know how much there is to trust about it.
For elliptic curves?
Just a basic idea of
algebra. It's kind of nice. If you have high school algebra, you're good to go.
With what we know now about elliptic curves and how things are attacked and all that, and what's the stupid the linear algebra attack on conventional Diffie-Hellman, the name of that stupid thing. The reason why we have elliptic curve, because it's not susceptible to the index calculus.
Yeah. That, yes.
Right. It's like, but you can understand, like, if you read through the index calculus stuff and why it doesn't apply to elliptic curve and all that. It's like, it's not super controversial, right? Like, but yeah, like that was his thing, right? Like, my advice is I don't trust elliptic curve, so maybe you guys shouldn't use elliptic curve, which is, by the way, terrible advice, right? Like, elliptic curve is much better than RSA.
And better than finite field primes that we were using before, especially for things that were Diffie-Hellman.
So what's weird to me about the blog post, like the primary weird thing to me is that, like, you're confronted with this wacky paper, and I can't believe anyone's beating down his door to, like, settle for once and for all, is this paper actually valid or not? It wasn't like there was a huge conversation before this about, like, maybe this paper is valid, right? Maybe I'm wrong about that. But, like, you presume he had, like, a minute to go call somebody, right? Like, he called
Roger Grimes.
Why was that his call? Like, why? Call Steve Weiss. By the way, it's Steve Weiss?
Weiss? Steve Weiss?
I would have said Weiss.
Call Scott Aaronson, who does quantum computing and wrote, like, the first book on
We
quantum
did it.
computing.
We found it. It's an emergency that only Scott Aaronson can say.
Like, I don't often... Scott Aaronson has a blog he writes about everything. And that includes things beyond quantum computing. So I don't often say, go read Scott Aaronson's blog post about thing. But when it's about quantum computing, including quantum attacks, at least in this case, someone should have asked Scott Aaronson about this attack.
So yeah, like, maybe the short summary here is, like, if there's, like, big news and, like, SHA-1 is, like, a story that where, like, if Schneier's writing about it, I'll pay attention to what Schneier's saying about it, right? Because, like, sure, he's done block cipher designs and work on that stuff, and I sound dismissive here. I've done none of this work, but on a story like this where it's like the lattice reduction math goes over my head, right? Well, okay, but, like, the lattice reduction math that we're talking about here, it's not new quantum math, right? It's one of the biggest stories in the analysis of RSA since 1991, predating applied cryptography by about 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, it's fine. Like, it's fine that that's not his thing. Like, that's not what he's doing. Like, why it's not my thing either, right? But why not just call somebody whose thing it is?
Yeah, because I went directly to the, like, what are they actually running on this quantum circuit? And, like, how big is the circuit? What are the target architectures that they're theoretically going to run this on? What is the circuit depth? Like, how long must this thing be able to, like, stay alive for on this quantum computer for it to be successful and have a useful result to go to this attack? And I was like, they have assumptions in here that I don't think are going to be at all for us to worry about for several more years. So I went directly to that. And it completely skipped over the fact that this was trying to speed up Schnorr's RSA factoring paper, that everyone was like, we know you're trying to do this for years and you're not succeeding. So the fact that this attack is trying to speed up that, like, there's a lot of people, including well-versed, Leo Dukas, who does lattices, like, lots of people who are full-on cryptographers in this space saying this doesn't work. This Schnorr paper, this attack doesn't work. If you're trying to throw some quantum fairy dust on it, it still doesn't work. And that's been in the ether, on the internet, on ePrint, presentations given about how this doesn't work. You could do a quick Google and you would find them. So I'm surprised that you wouldn't go either pick that up or go look for that before you start writing about it.
But these are opinions about, like, a Schneier story that I just read and like opinions I have about Schneier and kind of how Schneier is as a cultural figure here. Like there could be more to this that I don't understand and all that. But I'm less interested in the Schneier part of this. I mean, we're picking more than a bit on Schneier here, right? But he's not the only person that this kind of phenomenon of like the collapse of cryptography into a single subject has happened with. We saw this just a few months ago with Voldemort and the lawsuit against like the NIST quantum computing FOIA lawsuit.
Oh God, yeah.
Where it's like in the public consciousness, like Voldemort. And I guess it's probably more fair in Voldemort's case, right? Like we're talking about people who like specialize. That too.
Yeah.
But like we're talking about people who like specialize in block cipher cryptography, not specializing in, asymmetric number theory cryptography and all that. And like Voldemort is a notable counterexample, right? Like, but in the public consciousness, there's Voldemort, who is the acknowledged expert and internet cryptography hero, and nobody else, right? So like if Chris Pikert had said like, this Voldemort lawsuit is complete fucking bullshit, right? Like everyone would be like, who the fuck is this Chris Pikert guy? Like, Voldemort says so, and we're all the Death Eaters, so like we got to go with it.
At least in like the general technical kind of general engineering like space, there's specific names that people think of when they think of either cryptography or, Schneier writing about blah, because they kind of have not popular science books on cryptography, but they're definitely like popular names as opposed to real researchers, real cryptographic engineers. You know what I mean? Not saying that Voldemort isn't a real researcher or a real cryptographic engineer, because they are.
But Voldemort's talking at CCC every year, and Chris Pikert is not.
Exactly, right? And so like when the story comes out, it'd be helpful if people understood that like, if you're talking about post-quantum cryptography, some names of people who you should be super interested in hearing from would be Chris Pikert, Luca DeFeo. I mean, you could probably name more. I can only name those two.
Stephen Galbraith.
Yeah.
Who we had on this podcast.
Who was on our pod.
I had Galbraith's name.
Thomas forgot.
Yep, I had
You were on that episode.
No, I know. It's just I'm not going to get into the thought process I went into of whether or not to use it. I apologize to Stephen Galbraith, right? But yeah, it's helpful to know like a set of names in each of these. It's helpful to know roughly what the fields are or the subfields are, and it's helpful to know some of the other names. And here with the RSA attack thing, it would have been very helpful to know the names of some people whose reactions you would want to get long before Bruce Schneier's reaction. And that has nothing to do with Bruce Schneier, although I would fault him for not reaching out to any of those names to get a quote for the article that he put out that scared the shit out of everybody and had reporters calling him up and him telling like, giving a hedge thing about like, maybe this works, but probably it doesn't work, but maybe it doesn't work. Right?
And he's updated this post like 5 times, which is good. But also like the first cut that everyone sees was very like, I think we might need to worry about this. And it's like, no matter how many times you kind of amend and issue corrections, that's not the first signal that goes out. It's to me a little damning that the blog post, which got a lot of coverage, like a lot of traction, right? It's a little damning to me that the blog post doesn't talk about this destroys RSA controversy from a year and a half ago. Yeah, right? I just think he's not aware, which is not great. I don't know if he's aware or not. I'm certainly not making a claim there, but it seems pretty important to the story. This is part of that line of research, which has not panned out. It's not there. Long story short, just understand there are lots of different experts in different subjects, and they don't, as a rule, kind of cross over with each other. Yeah. And like, except for podcast hosts, we have to be experts on everything. Exactly. I will say, every field needs a couple people who you send to testify to Congress when your field needs to testify to Congress. And I'm happy that Bruce Schneier can do that. And I'm happy that Matt Blaze can do that. There are our official people to send to Congress. I think the world, I like Bruce Schneier too, but I think the world of Matt Blaze and certainly have no commentary about Matt Blaze. Matt Blaze is a good egg. Matt Blaze has the keys to your house. Deirdre, we did it. We came in at a tight 42 minutes. Yes. So I guess my conclusion would be, no, this is not destroys RSA with some quantum fairy dust. But it doesn't destroy RSA in a funny kind of way. Kind of funny. Yeah. Just kind of frustrating.
I find it funny.
Yeah. And 2, we need a little bit more understanding of there's a diversity of cryptography. Like quantum computing is like a whole nother thing. So like try to be aware of the diversity of expertise.
Yeah. There's the abstract algebra kind, and then there's the statistics kind.
Sure.
David, would you like to sign off on my unified theory?
I don't know, man. I don't believe in continuous math. I don't think it's real. You ever seen half a bit? Exactly.
Half a qubit? Well, kind of. I'm making vectors with my fingers about the fucking, polar coordinate. So no, RSA is not destroyed yet. Cool. That's it.
Okay.
Bye!
Security, Cryptography, Whatever is a side project from Deirdre Connolly, Thomas Ptacek, and David Adrian. Our editor is Nettie Smith. You can find the podcast on Twitter at SCWPod, and the hosts on Twitter at Durham Crustulum, at TQBF, and at David C. Adrian. You can buy merchandise at merch.securitycryptographywhatever.com. Thank you for listening.